Has your mental diet been trash? Do you notice throughout the day that your thoughts have been negative, worrying, discouraging, or maybe even angry? This is the one technique I keep coming back to, and every single time I use it, I'm like, why do I not use this more often? And every time it succeeds, it blows my mind, even though I've seen it work basically miracles. And I'm not talking about a complete overhaul to your approach. I'm talking about something you can do in 3 seconds throughout your day. This is going to be especially useful if you run anxious like I used to. But this is only for people who have already done the belief work, people who have already been doing the techniques like visualizing, scripting, affirming, mental dieting, but still aren't getting results despite taking a look at their belief system, trying to change their limiting beliefs or their assumptions that aren't working for them. And what it is this: you need to stop brooding, worrying, or fretting. So you can think of it kind of like a progress bar for your manifestation. When you think from the end, you're thinking as if you had your desire, right? So if you're manifesting SP, that might mean you're having internal thoughts of, okay, where are we gonna go for date night this Friday? And then the progress bar is gonna go up, closer to bringing your manifestation into reality. But when you worry, you're thinking as if you don't have your desire and that it's not gonna come. So your internal thoughts are more like, what if he never unblocks me? What if he hits it off with some other girl? And when you think those thoughts, then your progress bar goes down. So you can see how when you're doing the work and the techniques, your progress bar is going up, and before it can hit 100%, you're worrying again. You're worrying throughout the day randomly. It's not like you sit there and decide, okay, I'm gonna worry now, but like throughout the day, you're just like decreasing your progress bar and undoing all the work you did without even realizing it most of the time, because it's such an autopilot thing. Now, which of these forces is gonna win? Well, they're both part of your mental diet. You're thinking them both with feeling and with passive visuals, just like whatever you're imagining in your head when those thoughts come. I'm not going to say that 1 minute of manifesting is equal to 1 minute of worrying and they'll cancel each other out. It's not just time-based. It's based on your intensity and how strongly you feel, either that fear or that happiness or that gratefulness. And like I said, there's a lot of this worrying you're doing that you're not even aware of. And so you might think that you know exactly how many minutes you're worrying, but throughout the day, I guarantee you there are times when you just slip into that bad habit without even realizing it. But this worrying is exactly why you don't have your SP or your desire. If you're doing the techniques and you've already fixed your belief system so it's more or less good and you're still not getting movement. This is exactly why detaching works so well. It's also why when people try to stop manifesting something or when they don't want something anymore, it comes like immediately. Because when they're detached or disinterested, they're not worrying anymore. They pull themselves out of that lack state. And I know it sounds obvious to stop worrying, but if you've been doing the work and you haven't seen any movement for 30 days, then you are not doing this properly. And I don't blame you. It's hard. We all slip up from time to time. I mean, I used to be so anxious that my friends with like full-blown general anxiety disorder on meds would tell me like, hey, Leanna, you need to go get diagnosed for anxiety and get yourself medicated because you are very obviously anxious. But I discovered a few techniques that I want to share with you today that completely changed how often I worry and how I handle it when it comes up. So stay tuned. And I'm also going to tell you some of the craziest success stories I've had with this method. I hesitate to call it a method because it's so easy, and you're going to see why. First off though, if you feel stupid or foolish for worrying despite knowing the law, just stop. We've been trained to do this from birth. Like we're told it's the adult thing to worry, it's responsible, it's forward thinking, you need to plan for everything that can go wrong. But from a law perspective, this is exactly what not to do because you're essentially manifesting for what you don't want. And it's not our fault because most of us aren't taught from kids that our thoughts actually create reality. But now as an adult, you should know that when you worry, you're undoing all the manifesting work that you just did. Basically, every good thought you have, you're countering it with like 200 negative tiny ones throughout the day. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. And the most insidious part is you do it without realizing it. It's just become your autopilot. So how can you fix something if you don't realize you're doing it? What if you could just drop that negative line of thinking every single time it comes up? But first, you have to understand and admit that this is happening. Can you look back on today or yesterday and locate at least one instance of you worrying or thinking thoughts like, what if this goes wrong? Or I'm no good at this, or my 3D isn't reflecting? Or thinking about what you can do in a 3D or 4D to fix the problem. And if you're able to recall at least one memory if you're worrying, then perfect. This technique should work for you. So we're gonna use gamification because studies show that when you make something fun, you're more likely to stick to it. So you can make it a game to count how many times you can catch yourself worrying in a single day. And then you're gonna count them up. So this means that like throughout the day, you're gonna randomly check in on what you're doing in your mind. If your memory is pretty good and you can remember to do this throughout the day, then just do that. But if you're like me and you have ADHD and you get hyper-focused on something and the hours just fly by without you even realizing, then you can do what I did, which is set alarms throughout the day. So you can set an alarm every hour or every few hours, and when that alarm goes off, ask yourself, what was I just thinking? Was I brooding? Was I fretting? Was I worrying, or was I angry or spiraling? And if so, challenge yourself to drop it. Just completely switch your line of thinking. I tell people, think about literally anything else to get your mind off it. So that might mean chicken nuggets, it might mean SpongeBob, it might be kittens. I like to think about, are they gonna kill off another character in the show that I'm binging? Or would I rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? Like anything that'll just get your mind off of worrying or fretting. Literally think of anything else. Stop yourself from undoing all the hard work that went into your progress bar. And that's literally it. Take it from an ex-chronic worrier. I have had fantastic results with this. So I'll give you some examples from personal experience. So there was this one project at work that I was really stressing out about. And one night I was watching a movie with my partner, and usually movies are so immersive that I just completely forget about real life and I'm totally absorbed for 2 hours or however long that is. But not this time. I was so worried and anxious about work that in the middle of this super action-packed, exciting movie, I found myself thinking about how am I gonna fix these bugs, how am I gonna resolve these problems? Because at the time, I was working with a coworker who just wrote really sloppy code. I was working with another coworker who introduced a lot of bugs, and there was a third coworker who was a little more of a newbie, and I was helping to train him. But a lot of his mistakes would cost me and just take up a lot of my time. And when I realized that I was thinking and stressing about work during this movie, I was like, wait a minute, I know the law. It's so stupid that I'm worrying about this, because to worry about something is to imagine it with sensory vividness and to create it. But it had me so stressed out that I devised a plan right then and there to address it. And my plan was twofold. So I wanted to give myself baby steps because this was such a big issue for me. I first decided, okay, step one is just I'm going to stop worrying as much. And then once I got that down pat, step two is going to be to actually start manifesting for positive things. So that would be actually applying techniques like visualizing, mental dieting, affirming, scripting, whatever, to manifest what I actually want, which is a good outcome. But step one was, again, to just stop worrying. So that Friday night, I worried maybe 10 times, but I was able to catch myself and stop myself 3 times out of those 10. And then by Saturday, I was already starting to worry less. I didn't catch myself every time, but it didn't matter. Because by Sunday, I only worried 2 times, and I was able to catch myself worrying and dropping it both those times. And then come Monday, the bug that I didn't want to fix got assigned to one of my other coworkers, and he ended up having to take the fallout for all of that, and he ended up working on that for months. The coworker whose code I didn't like because it was really sloppy literally got moved off the project permanently and never came back to this project. And then the third coworker, who was really rookie, he ended up literally getting fired, which was not my intention, and I would never wish that upon someone. But I think that he went on to a project and to a company that was way more suited for him, that he enjoyed a lot more. And all I did was worry less. I didn't even get to part 2, which was actually trying to manifest a positive result. Just 3 days and it was a complete success for me. The problem went away completely. All I had to do was literally get my worrying down from constant to rare, and all my problems went away in 3 days. I think the most important part was to just set the intention of, yes, I want to catch myself worrying. And when I would, I'd spend 3 to 4 seconds of mental effort to stop and then pick a random topic to think about instead, and just let my mind run away with that. And you can pick any topic to think about. Sometimes I think about how much I love my pets, or sometimes it'd be something crazy like 1,000 hamsters versus 1 house cat. Sometimes, if it was a really big problem, I would immerse myself in something that I know would absorb all my attention, like a video game, maybe something fast-paced and multiplayer, or just a puzzle game that requires a lot of concentration, or a crossword puzzle. The reason why I want you to keep count of how many times you catch yourself worrying and how many times you're able to drop it is so that you can see yourself getting better in real time. That's why I told you how many times I started worrying on Friday and caught myself, and then Saturday and Sunday. Because you can see that as time goes on, even though it's only 1 day difference, that I get better and better at it. And it's really rewarding to see your own progress, and it makes you way more likely to stick to it. And there's no way to lose, because if you're able to count yourself worrying many times, then that's great. That means that you're catching yourself worrying more often. And if you're only able to count yourself worrying fewer and fewer times, great. That means it's possible that you're worrying less often. So basically, you're providing proof to your mind that you're getting better and better. And that just generates a positive feedback loop of, oh, look, I'm getting better at this. My mental diet's getting better. And if you feel better and more confident, then you'll do better. Another example is I had a relative that had a neurological condition that made their life pretty hellish, to be honest. And they have been on meds for about a decade. but it's a pretty rare condition, and the meds that they were on for it had stopped working. And so her doctor said, you will probably need to do this surgery, but it's open skull surgery. Like, we literally need to cut open your skull. And she was getting up there in age, and she was also really terrified. She didn't want to do it. And I was really struggling with the possibility of losing this loved one. And I'll be honest, I was just completely spiraling. Like, I could not really fathom life without this loved one. And I didn't want to think about it, but it seemed like we had no choice. And my other relatives were like pressuring me, since I have a medical background, to talk her into getting the operation done. So I was in this really horrible situation of like trying to come to grips with what happens if I lose this loved one, or, you know, what should I do? She's asking me if she should do it or not. And I worried for days. And these were like days filled with crying and nightmares. It was just not fun. But eventually I had to come to Jesus moment where I was like, okay, I just really cannot worry about this. Worrying is literally creating this situation, and the most compassionate thing to do for myself and for others is to completely withdraw my attention from the problem and not worry about it. Every single time I'd catch myself worrying, I would just drop and be like, no, it's okay. And the crazy thing is, a week or two later, she just was fine. She didn't need the surgery anymore. The symptoms just went away. Her medications that previously stopped working started working again. Like, it made absolutely no sense. And my relatives stopped calling me and texting me and hounding me to push her into getting the surgery done because she was just fine. To this day, biologically, like medically, I don't understand what happened to affect this sudden change. But if you told me that I jumped into a different timeline, I would believe you. Again, this is for people who have worked on their belief systems, who have tried to face their fears and dismantle them to some extent. And I'll eventually link to videos that deal with that up here. But if you have intense fears and you haven't tried to work through these fears at all, and so far you've just been repressing them and running from them, then this technique is not for you. This is for people who have tried to tackle that fear, who have tried to understand it and reason their way through it, and who like logically know that they shouldn't fear that thing anymore, but are still finding themselves occasionally worrying. Neville said that accepting your desires is like dropping a seed into properly prepared soil. So when you drop your desire as a seed into your consciousness, and you're confident that it's going to grow and appear in a 3D, then in his words, you've done all that is expected of you. But he said, and I quote, "To be worried or concerned about the manner of their unfoldment is to hold these fertile seeds in a mental grasp, and therefore to prevent them from really maturing to full harvest. And this was in your faith is your fortune." So he's basically saying, if you worry, you're just going to stop that seed from growing. You're going to stop your desire from appearing in reality. And Neville also said that your attention is like water for a plant. So if you withdraw your attention from something in your reality that you don't want to experience anymore, then it's going to wither and die, just like if you stop watering a plant. And Seth, channeled by Jane Roberts, has said this in his own words too. He says, "I have said this so many times, and I do realize it is difficult for you, but you cannot concentrate upon two things at once." And I just want to add, that's what Neville meant by you can't serve two masters. You can't serve the master of not having and the master of having. You have to pick a lane. You can't believe in the old story and the new story at once. You can't have both in one reality. Now back to the Seth quote. "So to the extent that you concentrate upon your pleasures, your accomplishments, and to the extent that you relate to the psychic and biological moment, you are refreshing yourselves. You are not projecting negatively, and you are allowing the problem to unwrinkle, unknot. You are denying it the energy of your attention that keeps it going." So basically, Seth says that we shouldn't worry about our problems, because when you worry about them, it's like tightening that knot. It's like keeping that knot existing. But when you stop worrying about it, it starts to loosen, it starts to untie itself and untangle itself. In the way that Neville talks about everyone is you pushed out, how your mental diet and your beliefs and your expectations and your assumptions basically translate out and dictate how people treat you, Seth also talked about this. But he specifically said it's essentially thought transmission, where if you're thinking negative thoughts or you have negative expectations from other people, you're transmitting these thoughts to them as like almost subconscious whisperings or commands, telling them how to act in your reality. So I want to share this quote with you from the Personal Sessions Book 5, where Jane, the author who channeled Seth, and her husband, who's an artist, are worrying about their work. Basically, he's worrying about his art and she's worrying about, well, they're both worrying about getting their book published. So Seth says, "To brood or worry or become resentful is as regrettable as it would be if you, say, painted a big X over one of your paintings because you were dissatisfied with a detail or two. Over a period of time, resentments X out large areas of otherwise productive experience. When you have fearful thoughts about a book, or worse, about a future book, then you feed other people's static. You increase to some extent their doubts as well as your own. Your thoughts have reality, but behind that statement is the apparently unrecognizable truth that your physical world is the exteriorization of your thoughts. So he's basically saying to them, when you brew to worry about one specific detail, it's like destroying this whole beautiful painting you made with a big X and rejecting it completely. Instead of thinking about all the ways that it's wonderful and all the things that are going well in your life, you focus on these tiny things and you magnify them until it eventually ruins the rest of your life. And he's telling them, don't be resentful to your contacts at the publisher that you're working with. Stop worrying about the book being published, because when you do, you're pushing everyone out to cause you problems. And this is what we're doing when we're worried about something. It doesn't matter if your manifestation doesn't involve a specific person. If you're worried about grades, then you're pushing out your teacher to grade you more harshly. If you're worried about being accepted to a job or university, you're pushing out the admissions committee or your interviewer to react a certain way. And Seth goes on to say, to concentrate on your problems is an exercise in negative meditation, in negative suggestion. So try to avoid that. And in all cases, your main concentration should always be upon your daily accomplishments, joys, the domestic meal, the hour of dawn or twilight, or whatever. This is highly important, for concentration upon negative experiences helps make you ill. For those of you who are Seth fans, you'll know that Jane Roberts struggled with an arthritis-like illness for most of her adult life. And Seth had constantly tried to give her advice and information on how to cope with that and how to cure herself. So much so that an entire book was dedicated to it called The Way Towards Health. And one of my favorite quotes from that book is Seth bluntly saying, refuse to worry. When your thoughts do touch upon your particular problem in that present moment, imagine the best possible solution to the dilemma. Do not wonder how or why or when the ideal solution will come, but see it in your mind's eye as accomplished. Or if you're not particularly good at visual imagery, then try to get the feeling of thanksgiving and joy that you would feel if the problem was solved to your complete satisfaction. It's essentially what Neville says, where when you catch yourself worrying, stop worrying and then replace it with the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Imagine how you would feel and imagine what you'd see, hear, smell if your desire came true. And don't worry about the how or the why. Your job is, like Neville said, to just drop that fertile seed into your consciousness and not dig it up or check it. And like Seth said, if you're not good at imagining, then imagine the gratitude or joy you'd feel if the problem were completely resolved to your satisfaction. And one last reminder, if you catch yourself worrying, you might feel tempted to scold yourself or put yourself down or like feel dumb about it. And I'm telling you, don't. It's not helpful. Seth said, do not blame yourself for inadequacies. Do not disapprove of yourselves. Do not compare yourselves to what you think you should do or be. You are creators in training, learning how to create responsibly. So don't focus on what you think your shortcomings are. Instead, remind yourself how powerful you must be to be able to create your world based on your thoughts. And that the only reason you don't have your desire yet is because your thoughts are so powerful that your thoughts of worry have been manifesting perfectly. All you have to do is redirect your power a little bit, and then you're on your way to getting what you want. And it only takes a few seconds to completely change your world. So give this a try. Set those alarms if you need. And I'll leave you with these words from Seth. Love yourselves and honor yourselves. What you do is good. What you are is good. You only have to tell yourself that until you believe it, because it is the truth. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!